Peas on Moss is brought to you by Kimberly Schaub, a culinary scientist turned business developer. Over the past 4 years, the audience has downloaded episodes over 40,000 times, and we have 1,500 impressions across the website and a host of social media platforms. Will you consider contributing to the show to help keep it on air? Donations through Patreon help to offset the costs of web hosting, editing, and producing the various Peas on Moss offerings, from podcast episodes to videos, and every little bit helps. From corporate advertisement to sponsored content and private contributions. Reach out to me on peasonmoss.com for details. Hey, Peas on Moss listeners. Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast today. It makes it worth carving out the time to edit and post these episodes. I start almost every day with a shot of espresso made with my hand-powered espresso maker, and I go through about a pound of coffee every 10 days. Or 2 pounds of espresso beans per month. And at about $14 to $16 per pound, that amount adds up. And I don't dismiss the privilege inherent to getting to enjoy this morning ritual. In sum, I am a heavy coffee user. Have you seen a coffee tree in person? Honestly, I hadn't until I got to go to Puerto Rico with the Research Chefs Association conference in March 2017. We walked around a family-owned estate resting on top of rolling hillsides and listened to the founders talk about the journey they had walked to establish the farm. Hurricane Maria followed just 6 months later and decimated that area, and to this day, some regions still don't have basic infrastructure reestablished. There is a need for this basic support, and organizations like the World Central Kitchen, founded by Chef Jose Andres, are still on the ground working with local organizations to feed and rebuild. That should be enough to make me pause as I raise my frothy espresso to my nose. It does. What shared responsibility or basic human care do we consumers need to foster with our producers and growers, even if we're separated by thousands of miles, various languages, and a zillion distributors and middle businesses? How do we even start? What are the most important issues? Well, one of the issues is that coffee harvesting is inherently a very wasteful process. We ultimately only consume the flavored water pressings made from soaked, roasted, fermented pits of cherry-like berries that grow on a little bushy plant. Fresh Cup, a coffee industry magazine, cited a report from Colombian logistics company Alma Cafe that only 6% of the original coffee plant even makes it to the cup of coffee, with everything from the plant and even the berries discarded or washed off, often causing considerable amounts of water loss and certainly resulting in a great deal of unused plant material. Well, this would signal the involvement of upcycled-minded companies. In this episode, we're focusing on 2 of them. The Coffee Cherry Company, based in Seattle, Washington, and Wize Coffee Leaf, based in Vancouver, BC. Both are founding members of the Upcycled Food Association, and I connected with them earlier this summer to review their work and mission. My first guest is Max Rivet, co-founder of Wize Coffee. When we were discussing the really creative upcycled use of coffee plant leaves to make tea, Max made me aware that 80% of the coffee agriculture workers are out of work when they are not actively harvesting and processing coffee. But the process to harvest and process the plant's leaves helps to extend the agricultural season. In our discussion, Max shares about Wize Coffee and describes why it's important to him and his business partners to be involved as a charter member of the Upcycled Food Association.
Thanks. Yeah, my name is Max. I'm the co-founder of Wise Monkey, and we're the pioneers of coffee leaf tea. We actually take coffee leaves from the coffee plant that are typically discarded 9 months a year, and we actually craft them into what would be, a delicious black tea, for example, or even a green tea. We've done different variations. What we sell right now is primarily closer to a black tea.
Tell me about the coffee tree leaf and why are you using that product?
So lots of different reasons. The main one being that it honestly just tastes really good. The tea that we create from the coffee leaf is something very unexpectedly delicious. In the beginning, we didn't really know what it would taste like. We just had a hunch. And sure enough, after a couple experiments and messing around, we found out that it was incredibly smooth and almost like sweet on its own. It's I wouldn't say it's sweet in the sense that it tastes like like a sweetened drink or like a juice, but it just has such a balanced taste. And the fact that there are no tannins in the tea, relative to like a black tea which has lots of tannins, and a green tea which has lots of tannins, makes it more bitter. Our particular product, the coffee leaf tea, doesn't have tannins, and so it's really, really smooth. It has that full body tea taste with kind of a light sweetness to it. So the taste is the number one reason why we kind of pursued all this, once we figured out that it actually was decently tasty. That being said, the genesis of the whole product, of the whole project and the product was started in France. My friend and I were studying there, and we found out that the coffee leaf has tons of antioxidants, and more so than the tea leaf and more so than the coffee bean itself, the leaf is actually incredibly healthy. And so we said, hey, well, why don't we look at this as like an entrepreneurship project, part of our class program. And as soon as we started doing research in the coffee industry, we realized that it's incredibly seasonal, and only 3 months a year you can actually get the bean out. And 9 months a year, 80% of the workers are out of work and they're looking for something else. And these farmers are trying to make ends meet throughout the off season, and it's incredibly difficult. It's also a very volatile commodity in terms of the pricing on the global market. So coffee growers and farmers are really stuck with whatever the pricing is on that day, and they have to sell it for that day. And in this scenario right now, the coffee industry is in a very tough position, and growers aren't making any money, and they haven't for quite a while. And so people are abandoning their crops. And we're trying to tell everyone, you don't need to do that. You actually have an awesome opportunity, and it's sitting right there in front of you.
So you're saying use a different part of the plant. So don't tear out your coffee plants. Use another part of it. Create another income stream is what I'm hearing.
That's exactly it. When we first met Enrique, our co-founder, when we met him, we told him about the idea. We showed him some concepts that we had created on another farm previous to meeting him. And immediately, you could tell he had this kind of light bulb moment where he's just like, wait a second, like this actually tastes really good. First of all. Secondly, I can make a year-round living with this. And third, I have an opportunity to be creative with it and be innovative with the processing method, way more so than the coffee bean. The main difference in that is that the coffee bean, you basically harvest it, you take the pulp off, and then you let it dry. There's some subtleties in how you can craft it, for sure. There's different processes, but generally speaking, it comes out as the same thing, as a dried bean that then gets shipped to a coffee roaster, in the US or Canada or Europe, and then they do all the roasting at the end of the line, which is where the majority of the value is actually added to the product. In this scenario with the leaves, you can't ship an unfinished leaf. It's just going to rot. So instead of having a commoditized product that then goes somewhere else for the value to be added, he can actually create a different type of coffee leaf tea just by using different methods. So, for example, we've done a black tea style that was fermented. It was had like a cherry red color from the color. The liquid itself was kind of a cherry red color. It was really sweet, super bold. We've done more of an oolong or like a light black tea style method, which is what we're currently selling right now across all of our products. It's the same base, just with different botanicals and ingredients. And then we've also done different things like Japanese green tea style, and a Chinese pan fry style, Chinese smoke style. And it has like a nice smoky notes to it. And this is all something that they can do at the farm level and get creative and have these new kind of skilled trades. And it's really cool because now Enrique is getting really creative with how he's making different teas. So, for example, right now we have a couple micro lots that are aging in a rum oak barrel, and this is a barrel that was used by the rum company Flor de Caña, which is based in Nicaragua. It's an award-winning, globally recognized rum brand. And so right now we're aging coffee leaf tea in these rum barrels, and in about a year's time, we're going to crack one open and see how it tastes. So it's something that is unprecedented for the industry. especially in a time of need right now where farmers are just abandoning their crops because they don't have that year on income. They don't have the visibility on income. And if you don't have visibility on income, you can't get credit. And then, you can't invest in your farm to create efficiencies and things like that. So it's really, it's kind of this cycle in coffee where you could just never get over the hump. And in this particular scenario, the leaves that we're using are what they would throw away. And so it's basically just the most complementary product that creates a year-round cycle for coffee farmers, and also gives them an opportunity to add some value and do something craft with their own hands, to a drinkable format versus just shipping a dried coffee bean.
That's amazing. And I mean, it seems like an obvious explanation for why you have also gotten involved with the Upcycled Food Association in its early founding stages. How did you hear about Upcycled Food Association, and why did you join while you yourselves are also in the startup, early years stages? Why was it important to still be part of this?
I mean, it's one of those things like, organic, wasn't popular in the 50s and 60s, and hitting that over time. And the way that we look at it, we're already pioneering this with the coffee leaf. It's in our DNA to go out there and try to push this mentality, this kind of mindset where, we're missing opportunities for people to make a living. We're missing opportunities to find new products that are healthy and have been proven to be healthy for hundreds of years, just have never been really explored in a modern sense or in a creative sense from a crafting perspective. And so from an upcycled food perspective, I met Dan from Regrained, I don't know how many years back, maybe 3 years back now. And, being founders, you have similar challenges. It's always like I think what we call it founder therapy sessions, where we basically just vent about all of the stuff we're dealing with and just kind of help each other go through it. It's definitely a relationship. And Dan is the one who introduced me to the Upcycled Food Association, and, us being in that realm. And again, just, being used to pioneering stuff and having to do the hard work first to get the benefit later, it just made perfect sense. And I would, I'm more than happy to join and just be of any sort of assistance to try and get the message out there and try to help people think, or help people understand that upcycled food is not a lesser quality. In a lot of cases, it's actually a lot better than what's already currently existing out there, as a competitive product. In our scenario, that's absolutely right. Same thing with Regrain. They still have incredibly, really healthy bars, and it's made from upcycling something that was, definitely a burden and a waste product. So it was just a perfect alignment. And when I heard about its creation of the association, I was like, oh man, that's amazing. Like, we need that. Mm-hmm. We need a group to like get together and start talking about this and start having a voice for all these brands that are trying to make a legitimate difference, environmentally, but also socioeconomically in some cases. So yeah, I mean, from a crafting perspective and an ingredient kind of side of things, for in terms of general takeaway, I'd say it's a really good ingredient as a platform just to become creative with. It's very forgiving. It has a nice kind of sweet taste to it, and that kind of tea body that people are familiar with, but none of the tannins or that kind of, in some cases, almost offensive astringency that you get from a traditional tea product. At the end of the day, it's 25 million coffee farmers that are surviving off a 3-month harvest. If you can imagine the impact, if they can get a year-round income, that's a game changer for all of those economies and all those, especially the rural economies that don't get a lot of support from the government in their particular regions.
Next up, I speak with the Coffee Cherry Company's culinary liaison, Aaron Brannon, and Senior VP of Sales and Marketing, Carol Woodmeyer. I've known of the Coffee Cherry Company since 2012 when I was at Modernist Cuisine, because Chef Jason Wilson of the Bellevue-based restaurant The Lake House and downtown Seattle restaurant Miller's Guild was using his fine dining imagination and a gourmet kitchen at Restaurant Crush to experiment with the novel ingredient, dried coffee cherry fruit powder. The Coffee Cherry Company eventually established their headquarters in the former restaurant space, and they began exploring the wide variety of applications from baked goods to beverages to confections to chocolate bars. In our conversation, Carol takes us through the founding story of the brand, and then Erin describes her culinary aha moment, when she stopped thinking of the ingredient as a flour, but as a powder that could be incorporated in various formats. And because this feature is about the Upcycled Food Association, we also talk about the heart of why the Coffee Cherry Company felt strongly about joining the UFA trade mission, and how CPGs can be part of the mission by incorporating the ingredient into their products.
So the Coffee Cherry Company, in its early form, originally called Coffee Flour, started, as you said, as a concept or an idea, probably in 2012, really became a commercialized or starting to commercialize in 2015. Much of that gap became a formal business in middle of 2013. Much of the first early years were really focused exclusively on supply chain development and ensuring that we could take our founder's vision and turn it into a strong, safe ingredient. And his vision really came from the consulting work he did with coffee companies, being a former director of engineering for Starbucks. Exposed him to the coffee world. And while he was doing some consulting after he left Starbucks, he was down in Central America, saw large piles of fruit that were frankly rotting in fields near the coffee mills that were producing the green coffee beans. For those who aren't familiar, coffee cherry is the fruit that green coffee beans are the seed or the pit of. To get to that green bean, which is really where the coffee economy developed, you have to open up the fruit. And so the fruit is a byproduct. It otherwise goes into fields and streams. It really, for the most part, decays, and there are billions of pounds produced each year. So in seeing all of this, Dan looked and said, there has to be something productive that can be done with that fruit other than just sitting there and letting it rot. And the people that he was working for looked at him and challenged him and said, well, if you could figure out what to do after hundreds of years of it not being effectively used, you'd be a genius. And it turns out he is a genius. And he worked on that problem and came up with a solution that involves dehydrating the fruit using, in our case, a patented and patent pending proprietary process with the washed process for fruit that ensures that it is handled side by side with the green bean and in a manner that ensures that it is food safe, not just for a beverage that automatically comes into contact with water, but in baking and snacks, in beverages, in chocolate. So he established, and we as a company have established food safety standards that meet or exceed global standards to the best of our ability with all of the appropriate lab tracing. And so the first 2 years were about teaching our supply partners how to implement this process in origin countries and to ensure that the product that was being produced met those standards. Once we have that dehydrated process in chunks, it's then sent to the US right now for finished milling. And our original product was a powder, which was originally, again, coffee flour, where the company name came from. Subsequently, we have, even trying to use some of our byproduct, created a second version, which is more of a flake, and it is optimized actually for beverage and for steeping. And then we have the original pieces. So we now have 3 different sizes of coffee cherry. We source from multiple countries, including Nicaragua, Guatemala, Brazil, Mexico, Papua New Guinea, El Salvador, a tiny bit from China. So we explore and have the ability to tap into different flavor profiles, different elements, slightly different nutrition based on the agricultural inputs. That is, though, because we now have the 3 varietals, why ultimately, and the 3 grind sizes, we felt it was necessary to change our company name. So in 2019, took me a while to convince everybody that that was the right thing to do, but we became officially the Coffee Cherry Company.
So let's talk about the culinary applications. You've mentioned snack, baking, beverage, confectionery with chocolate. I know that, I've gotten to taste a few of the back of house idea products that Erin and her team has developed for too. So Erin, I want you to share kind of what are some of the fun culinary applications that you've had, and then what are some of the commercial applications that you would recommend we look into?
Oh, definitely. All of the applications are fun for me. I'll start that off. Baking is where we started off initially. Again, we were called coffee flour. So typically we experimented with things that contain flour in them. It was, let's see, I joined in 2014, so it was early 2015 that just by happenstance at my home, I decided to play around a little bit. I had made some giant soft pretzels, and I thought, what goes better with a giant soft pretzel than a good mustard? So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to try something a little different. And that was the game changer for me. That's when I realized that, wait a minute, this, although we've been using it as a quote unquote flour, this actually has so much more potential. So I started playing around with the coffee cherry powder, and I made a whole grain mustard that really turned out fantastic. So then I started playing around with condiments, sauces, soups, things that weren't flour-based. And it really opened up a whole new avenue. The baking, of course, is tons of fun. I tend to lean towards the more savory side of things. So as far as the baking, although we were doing cookies and brownies and all the things that you traditionally think about on the sweeter side, we really started experimenting with breads and things that were definitely on the savory side. We did, again, start experimenting with condiments and the soups and the sauces area, which then led us to spices, rubs, things like that. So it's all been a lot of fun. It's all been very educational. There have been a lot of really eye-opening moments. Again, the biggest one for me was that turning point where you realize that this is not a flour. This is something completely different, and it can really fit into, so far, every category that you would think of, things that you would want to eat or drink. It can really fit into every category. So one of the first questions that people learning about coffee cherry will ask is, does it taste like coffee? And it actually does not. The taste of coffee that we all so enjoy in the morning comes from the roasting process of the pit, or what we know as the bean. So that's where the traditional coffee flavor comes from. Our flavor profile, because as we've established, we are a fruit, has a raisinated or dried fruit flavor profile to it. Think of those late summer fruits, the plums, the nectarines, the cherries, currants, and of course, depending on the varietal, that flavor profile will change a little bit, but the basis of it is always a raisinated stone fruit, late summer, deep purple, deep red fruit. Now, some of the differences in the varietals are, I always tend to explain the varietals as being a family tree. So say the varietals from South America, you can tell that they're all on the same family tree, but they're cousins of one another. So they're similar, but you can tell that they're different. You move to some place like China, and it's a completely different profile. It still has that fruit profile, but the China product is very red and very juicy. The product from El Salvador seems to have a little bit more savoriness to it, but it still has that fruit flavor. The El Salvador is actually quite interesting. It has the savoriness that I speak of is the best way to describe it is like a butternut squash. So you still have sweetness to it, but it does have that savory note. So as in any agricultural product, the region that it's grown will definitely have an effect on the flavor profile. It's that terroir that we're looking for. But they all have the same base, roasted, dried, raisinated fruit notes.
So how you described the sourcing and development of the supply chain for coffee cherry is very much in line with the upcycled food movement. Are you involved with the Upcycled Food Association? And what does that involvement look like?
Well, we are, as a matter of fact, we are charter members of the Upcycled Food Association. And right now it is informational. As the association is established and grows, it is providing input in terms of prioritization. What types of topics do we need to cover? Not just marketing, but how do we functionally support the upcycled ingredients industry? Because this industry has a unique challenge. We're taking what people view as waste or byproduct and turning it into something that we are asking people to eat. So there are some perceptions with that. There are also some, even gets down to regulatory issues. How do you take the leap from all of the approved ingredients that create this byproduct and then make sure that everybody understands that this is the exact same thing and it is safe for everybody? So there's just a lot of issues and opportunities, and having that association kind of leading that conversation is really going to be helpful.
So, Erin, from a culinary perspective, I know that the culinary school that you and I both went to was really focused on sustainability. And so us using scraps differently, thinking very carefully about the food product we're using before it hits the compost bin was something that, our culinary instructors really watched us carefully for. I think we as culinary students looked out for each other, What is it for you as far as the Upcycled Food Association or addressing food waste? What is it that kind of stirs your heart?
That's a great question. It all stirs my heart. There's so much food waste in the world. We are all aware of it. And there are so many people that go hungry in the world, and we are all aware of it. So any type of food waste it's just that. It's a waste, especially an item that packs so much nutrition. One of the things that we found early on and that we really wanted to tie ourselves to was keeping a certain percentage of the product at origin to feed the people that were growing the product. If we can incorporate it in something that is an everyday food item for people at origin countries, whether it's naan or tortillas, whatever their base food product is, if we can help incorporate that into their base food products, that helps not only take care of some of the waste problem, but it also helps obviously improve their own nutrition. And it is them utilizing something that they grow that literally is at their feet. So it's not just about the food waste, but it's about the utilization of the food in a positive way. So that, for me, that's really one of the core items. There's no need to have food go to waste when it could be giving people nutrition, and it's also cleaning up the environment surrounding these origin these farms down in these origin countries. So by using this, it's only a plus down every avenue. We want to use this food waste. We want to supply nutrition where we can and help clean up the environment, and it will really change the trajectory of these communities completely.
That absolutely is so important for us to understand how we're involved in our supply chain. We're buyers from it. And Carol, you and Erin are selling an ingredient to the other parts of the Western food supply chain.
Right.
But obviously we impact the country of origin of that food and the people who are growing and harvesting. I think were there business initiatives that Coffee Cherry was working on with those countries of origin growers, with the business owners or the farmer owners?
Yes, part of our mission, in addition to, as Erin said, trying to help improve nutrition in those communities by utilizing Coffee Cherry, there's a business side to this also, where we are creating new revenue streams and new job opportunities in those communities. This fruit was a byproduct or waste product. They were not, if at all, not consistently paid for the weight of the fruit, just for the bean. That is where the economy, and it's a linear economy, to turn it into a more circular economy, we needed to help create the economic piece to this as well. So we've pledged to pay the farmers in association with the mills on a per pound basis for the fruit. And because our process requires handling simultaneously with the green beans, It's created new jobs because they have to have another line to produce the coffee cherry. And in doing so, one of the really great things that we've learned is that it's opening up jobs to women for the first time, because there are standard bags that coffee beans are put into. They're basically 60 kilogram bags, about 120 pounds. It is physically challenging for women to handle bags of that size. And when you pack those same bags with dried fruit, they are much more physically manageable, which opens up those jobs to women for the first time in communities where, frankly, new jobs are not easy to come by. So we see consistent revenue streams that can help offset the volatility of commodity pricing for green coffee beans and the development of jobs for women. Down the road, as coffee cherry in volume increases and our impact and origin can increase, we believe that by hiring more women, it also then will support more children going to school, because it will create the dollars needed for uniforms, for books, because those have to be paid for in many of those communities. So that's a big picture vision on how we can help, not just from a nutrition standpoint, from an environmental standpoint by removing the fruit, and then from an economic standpoint by creating revenue and job opportunity. So it's a very exciting situation, and we actually have the ability to put some traceability on all of this. So one of the things we talk about is that this is our story to facilitate, but until it goes into end products that hit consumers' shelves, either in a grocery or at a food service, it's those companies' stories, because they're the ones that make it happen. But we have the ability, with a purchase of coffee cherry, to know how much revenue would be generated for a farmer, how much fruit out of those fields or streams. And ultimately, we'll be able to trace how many new jobs have been created. So we have the ability to help companies that care about sustainability as part of their brand messaging to truly be able to walk the talk.
This year has been a time to focus on the Upcycled Food Association, and it's made me a different consumer. I'm more conscious of the waste I generate in my own kitchen and more critical of the shortcut ingredients I used to buy. I'm also self-conscious about how often I consume products without considering the waste generated to get to me and in a format that I want, and I'm thinking of my daily coffee habit closely. It's pretty difficult to contemplate eliminating the ritual, but I can choose to purchase coffee and upcycled foods made from the waste generated by the coffee making process to help offset and use wholesome foods. Another component to consider in our coffee economy is the people, from the farmers to the processors to the roasters and the brands. I'm a big fan of supporting as local an economy as I can, and I'm also starting to seek startup and upstart brands, especially those who employ marginalized populations. Whether that is by supporting a person of color-owned shop, or shops whose missions seek to employ disabled individuals, refugees, or even formerly incarcerated people who may benefit from the targeted support to help get the ball rolling for their own personal success. Every single dollar spent is a vote in support of a certain type of economy and product. And we consumers and members of the food industry have significant agency to indicate what we will support. You can get more information about food and upcycling at the Upcycled Food Association website, where they share the trade association's mission and lists the member brands. Learn more about the fourth wave coffee movement and Black-owned coffee businesses at Whetstone Magazine's podcast, Point of Origin. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Talk to you again soon.